Hello, everyone. I'm Sam Eckmann of Gold Derby. With me is Oscar and Emmy winner Stephen Price, composer of Last Night in Soho. And Stephen, you have become really one of Edgar Wright's main collaborators across his movies. You have contributed several scores, and I know you work very closely with him. So I'm just curious, what were the initial sort of conversations around this movie like, and what was getting you interested at the start of the project?
Well, the thing that always gets you interested is the fact it's an Edgar film, and so music's going to be a real center to things. And he thinks in a really brilliantly musical way, and has a sort of encyclopedic musical sort of knowledge. So for me, it's just great. It's like, spending time talking about music with someone who's great at it. But this one is that when I first spoke to him about it, he was kind of, well, it's largely based in the 1960s. So that's a big tick because that's the era that, the record collection of my parents was that. So that's what I grew up with. And then the more we talked about his influences and the things he was looking to do with it, and the fact it's quite a different sort of film for him as well, felt very exciting, and it's pushing in different directions than we'd done before, and really ambitious in the way that music was going to be used. So it was, it's an exciting first few chats really that just made it clear that this was going to be, a good adventure to go on.
Yeah, and you're right. His films, like music, is always so integral to the storytelling. As a composer, what does that do for you working with a director who thinks about it in that way? How does working on one of Edgar's films compare to, a regular project for you?
I think it's the fact that music is really running through the core of the film. So, we have a soundtrack which combines these amazing song choices that he's made and original score as well. But within that, everything is kind of up for grabs. The songs themselves aren't just being used as conventional needle drops where you're just dropping a song in and that's doing its job. We will play with that and sort of weave it into the tapestry of the whole film. So for me, it brings about this possibility to make the whole soundtrack kind of sing and sort of the ebbs and flows of a soundtrack over the entire film. And we work really closely together and with Edgar's editor, Paul Matchless, to sort of put these things together and to try to find the way to shape every single moment. And it just means I end up doing a lot of different things. On this one, there's moments where I took a 60s song and would kind of stretch it into a whole new shape. But then there's moments where it's a more conventional scoring sort of opportunity for me, and I'm sort of writing the original stuff. So it means you wear a lot of different hats, and you're very really involved in the filmmaking of it. And that's what I really love, really, is making something that feels really unique to a story.
Yeah. There is a lot of 60s. Did you go back to certain movies or songs to get like inspiration for your own music there? Where do you draw on from the 60s?
60s is kind of very much my area anyway. So it was just, I spent a lot of time on this one trying to work out how to get the exact right sort of tone for reversed guitars, trying to make it sound like I'm only sleeping and things like that. So I was straight down a rabbit hole as soon as the opportunity was there. But the score, I definitely wanted it to feel like it was drawing from the 60s. I mean, the whole story of the film is kind of this idea of these echoes of the past seeping into the present. And I wanted the score to feel like that. I wanted it to feel like there were snippets of 60s sound that had kind of gone through this process of the last 50, 60 years and feel like they're kind of stretched, but still recognizable at the same time. And so the score's got a lot of more band influence things rather than just conventional orchestra. There's a lot of bass guitars, a lot of drums, there's a lot of guitars and mellotrons, a huge amount of voices. And they all sort of come together with the orchestra, and there's the electronics in there as well, but it all hopefully feels quite organic. And a lot of the techniques were 60s derived. There's an awful lot of old school tape looping going on, rather than just having a computer delay, you literally put it on a bit of tape and let the tape degrade as it looped through. Lots of those sort of things that were drawn from 60s techniques.
And so because the movie sort of split into two eras with the 60s and present day, did you think of them as sort of having to use different techniques when you hopped between, scenes from a different era?
A little, and gradually you'd kind of bring those two things together. And certainly in the contemporary stuff, there's a lot more electronic stuff. There's a lot more synth going on there. There's a lot more sort of modern production things, but all the time, these sort of echoes of the past are there, whether it be, I would use little snippets of the dialogue from the 60s bits of the film, and they would loop through and become part of the rhythm of the contemporary music. And so gradually, as the film progresses, these two eras, they sort of meld together and melt down, and it becomes more and more troubled, I guess it sounds like, as the state of Ellie's character kind of sinks further down this story. So yeah, they start off kind of a little disparate, but gradually they become this other thing. You know, they grow together.
Mm-hmm. How do you think of character when you're composing? Because when you have a scene in front of you, are you, is your first instinct to sort of tell the inner life of this character? Or are you more focused on like the whole theme and the feeling of a scene?
That's a good question. I think there's a bit of everything. Certainly, when you start writing on something, to me, it's very much character based, and it's almost this empathetic sort of approach where you're trying to sort of feel as the character feels. And often my first take is really close to individual characters, and it's when you've written a score and then you start to review it over the course of the film and watching it again and again and again, and you start to realize where the point of view should be in each of these scenes. And maybe you're too close to that character here, and actually the bigger story is being told, and you realize you should be using a different thematic idea there with a little bit of your character in it. But for me, it comes through this process of just working and watching and working and watching, and gradually the film starts to tell you what to do. You'll kind of be watching a scene, and whilst when you were watching and working on it individually as a small cue, it meant what it meant. When you watch it in the run of a film, actually that part needs to be expanded and stretched in a different sort of a way. So gradually the film sort of gives you the solutions if you're kind of alert to it. And working with people like Edgar and Paul, their feedback is crucial to that as well, because they can kind of see things from a different angle. They're not stuck down the rabbit hole of working on a musical cue. They're seeing the bigger picture. And so they were brilliant at telling me sort of, I think here we should be really focusing on Sandy, or here we should be, feeling that the drift of this moment. So yeah, it's a lot of trial and error, but that's how I tend to get there in the end.
Yeah. And in addition to sort of the 60s sounds that you incorporate, there's a lot of, pop hits, from the 60s. What is your process like when your score has to, because it doesn't feel like it just inserts a song for most of the movie. It sort of all weaves together. How do you go about accomplishing that?
Well, I think you kind of, the songs give you this sort of structure in those places that they use. They give you the rhythm, and often Edgar's shot to the song. So sometimes that rhythm is in every movement and every bit of dialogue on screen. It's all interlinked. But when you start to look at it as in the body of the film, it's kind of, what is that song really saying about the story, and how can score help that? And there's moments when we've got ostensibly a happy song, for example, something that feels very upbeat. And we found a way to kind of use score to playing alongside with that, to make it something different, to make it mean something different. And suddenly the words of the Sandy Shore song, always something there to remind you, it turns into this kind of nightmarish vision halfway through the film, where it starts off this conventional little pop song that we know and love, and gradually these other elements grow around it. And so opportunities like that are there with Edgar's films, where the songs work great, as this trigger and this memory and this momentum of the film, but we also play with the meaning of those things. And that's one of the things I think is really satisfying about working on Edgar's films. You get to play with all of these different worlds.
Yeah. I think probably maybe the best example of that is Anya Taylor-Joy's Downtown. That performance becomes a big centerpiece of the film, and a big sonic centerpiece of the film. And it was really, thrilling to hear, not only because I didn't really know Anya could sing like that before, but it becomes this very kind of haunting twist on it. Can you talk about just what was the process behind the creation of that?
Well, that was just amazing. I mean, it was always in the script that Sandy, her character, was going to do an audition, and she stands on the stage of the Rialto and she sings the song Downtown. What we didn't know is, would Anya sing that, or would we find some film trickery or whatever? Would there be a band with her? Would there be, whatever? There might be many ways to play that scene. And so Edgar and I went to the studio very early one morning, to the film studio, and before they'd shot that, and just went in with us and a piano player. And Anya came down and, well, this is what we're going to do. And she'd been listening to the song. Piano player started and she just sang it. And it was amazing. And she can sing, and the quality of her voice is great. And she's very, very musical. So she was adding these little touches and little individual stylistic things, which were great. And out of that, it's like, well, shall we try a version that's slow? And we'll try and, do this slower, more ethereal thing, which again, she was great. And that's like, well, could we now try this without the piano and go for a really direct thing? Because that might be powerful. And she did that. And we ended up going into a studio before they shot that scene and doing some pre-records just to make sure we had it in case they were doing lots of cutaways and all those sort of things. We had this steady version. And again, she absolutely nailed that. And the shoot went really well. And meanwhile, in the background, Edgar and I were going like, well, this is great. You know, that we've got she can sing really well. And it feels like this voice is really important to the film. And then the idea of, well, could she sing in the score? Would she be up for that? You know, and the idea that her character is almost like singing a siren song throughout the whole film, and she's calling through to the future. You know, we could embed little notes here and there and little phrases that would kind of, Ellie would be hearing it in modern day London, and it's all sort of drifting back through the ears. And so Anya was up for that, and we spent another couple of days in the studio, and she was great. And then at the very end of the whole process, the trailer had come out, which had a little snippet of her singing Downtown, and we were getting a lot of people saying, oh, where's the rest of the song? We'd love to hear the rest of the song. And we'd only recorded the first sort of minute or so for the film. So then the idea came up, well, let's go and record a single. Let's go in and make, you know, a double 7-inch double A side single, you know. So we did that, and we went into Abbey Road in June, so long after the film had been complete. And we did it in the old fashioned sort of way. We got all the musicians in the room. And we did a couple of 60s covers. So we did a version of Downtown like that. And then we did a version of You're My World, the Still a Black song, which also features in the film. And then we're recording away, and Edgar comes over and says, oh, we should do a version a bit like the trailer. And I had no preparation for this whatsoever, right? I had not planned doing that. But the musicians were amazing. We slowed it down. We started playing with the, you know, how to phrase it. And gradually it had this atmospheric new version, which I then took home and added some of the textures that are in the film score. So a lot of the mellotrons and the, you know, the basses and all those sort of things that I'm playing elsewhere. And we had this other version. So it's been this constant sort of, you know, from that first day when we heard Anya sing, it's expanded to, you know, she's the voice of the film score, and now she's, you know, got this single out. So it's been great to work with her on that.
I would imagine it feels kind of very cool to have the, you know, the song you recorded as really the centerpiece of the trailer. Even people who haven't seen the film yet are like talking about, you know, that trailer moment.
Well, and it was so nice to do something that you know, again, took a song that everyone knows so well and kind of recast it in a new sort of way. And it just felt so super film. And I loved the video they did. I don't know if you saw that. They did a video, and it felt like watching one of those, you know, 90s sort of songs that were done for a film where there's snippets of dialogue from the film and all that. It just felt like, you know, one of those wonderful things from the past. So yeah, enjoyed that process a lot.
Yeah, and the atmospheric elements you talked about, I think, are in much of the score because there's this definite horror element to the movie. How you know, how comfortable were you like trying to dive into horror? That seems so different from much of your work.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not something I've done before. And again, you're just in good hands because you're working with people that you've worked with a lot before. And so I could try and fail, and, you know, no one fired me. So it was hard to work it out initially, and things like, you know, how to prepare for a scare moment. It was a very different, you know, there's been hints of that in some of my other work, you know, moments where you're, you know, reducing textures and suddenly finding a way to attack, and the level of that and how to you know, manipulate is too strong a word, but you're definitely trying to get some effect. You know, you're definitely trying to make people jump and out of their skins, and finding the methods to do that, and finding ways to vary that and to make it feel like it wasn't just a sort of cliched jump scare, and that it was doing something really precise to the film. And again, Anya's vocals came in so useful for that. There's various moments of that when, you know, where you'd expect the orchestra to being sort of huge in those moments, it's often just a single breath or something like that. We kind of tried to invert the way that we'd done it in other places. So yeah, it was scary because I've not done it before, and it wasn't something I was familiar with, but, you know, that's never a bad thing.
Yeah, new experiences are always good. I do want to ask you before we have to go, you know, you won an Oscar for Gravity. First try at the Academy Awards, you win. And what is, you know, can you think about your career like post that Oscar win? Did you notice that there were new experiences your way, new types of work and scores after that win?
Well, I think that the fact that, you know, it did happen so early in my career, and I was so fortunate to have had that opportunity. I mean, really, I don't know if I would have got any more opportunities if that hadn't happened. You know, it's definitely an industry where, you know, your path can change all of a sudden, and that opened a lot of doors for me, and just meant I could keep having new experiences, really. And for me, the fun of the last sort of 10 years, or however long it's been since that moment, you know, it's been about different experiences, and, you know, working in different genres, and trying new things. And, you know, I've done purely electronic scores, and I've done purely orchestral scores, and melodic and not so melodic, and, you know, all of these things have challenged in different ways. And at the end of the day, I just really love telling stories with music, and I'm fascinated by how that can be done in new ways and different ways, and kind of unique ways. And so you're looking for projects which let you do that, really. And someone like Edgar's fantastic with that. You know, we're always trying to work out new stuff. And yeah, I just feel incredibly fortunate I get to do this for a living, really, because you are always sort of being challenged with new ideas, really, and hopefully finding ways to, you know, put something great on the screen, and, you know, take people away on a bit of a journey away from what can be quite a tricky life nowadays, you know.
Well, we certainly went on a great journey with Last Night in Soho. It was great work in the film. So everyone go out and catch Last Night in Soho, and stay subscribed to Gold Derby. Keep in touch with us throughout the season. And Stephen, thank you so much for talking. It was great to talk to you.